Matthew Cheung, both you and John Brumby talked about your appreciation of how racing does benefit the community. Do you think over time that will be understood more broadly on the Chinese mainland and across China more generally?
My own view certainly is this will be, Hong Kong will be a very successful model for mainland, particularly for mainland if it starts off, it's a completely fresh exercise on mainland China. Hong Kong is a good model. As I said, it's a win-win recipe, particularly its non-profit making business model provides integrity. And also, as Michael just said, that a consolation for those who lose money.
And John Brumby, you correctly identified these great events in Melbourne that kick in and help the community. The Australian Open Tennis, of course, the masterpieces, Michael wouldn't argue with that, the Spring Carnival, the AFL. What is the Grand Prix doing on the list?
Well, the Grand Prix is probably one of the mix of events, and I think the point I was making in my presentation is that the world in which we live, the world is sort of flat if you look at digital communication. So content is really important, and I think whether it's racing, whether it's arts, whether it's literature, people are after content, and racing provides content and theatre and activity and stories. And if you're putting together in a city a calendar of major events, then racing's a huge part of it, football's a huge part of it, and the Grand Prix's got its place. It's probably a different audience to the racing. It requires a higher level of subsidy, I think, than some other events, but it's got its place in that mix and mosaic of events that goes to make up the appeal, the lifestyle, the content, and part of the global reputation. And I repeat, for a city like Melbourne, we don't have a Great Barrier Reef, we don't have a Sydney Harbour. Being able to put on events that are then broadcast around the world is important. But in my mind, it's all about content, and that's why I thought, my comments and Michael's went well together, because livability, great institutions, great buildings, great architecture, but great content, racing, sport, arts, culture is what goes to make a great lifestyle. And if you've got a great lifestyle, like Melbourne, like Hong Kong, like London, like New York, you will attract the best people from around the world. So I think it's got its place, but it's not as big an earner as the Spring Racing Carnival.
Yeah. And on the integrity issue, and you did sound a gentle warning that they have to be ever mindful of the issues. You get the impression, though, with some sports that they tend to react to events as they happen, that they're not proactive enough. What would you say about racing?
Well, I'd say in our country that racing does pretty well. But I'm on a lot of boards, and the big thing for a board is focusing on your risks and how you manage those risks. And for racing, there are a number of events that might have a low probability of occurring, but they have a high or catastrophic impact if they do. And so I mentioned in my speech, getting integrity right is really fundamental. Getting governance right is really fundamental. Never underestimating the public trust that is placed in you by government and the citizens generally. Never being arrogant about that. But I think in Australia, we do those things pretty well. The respective boards and governments manage those risks and look to the future. But nothing's perfect. But I think we do it in Australia pretty well. And as I said, it may serve as a model that can be applied in other parts of the world, where by government fiat, racing's established, race days, legislation, wagering, all of those things, public trust, and then making sure you've got the model to properly share the benefits of that across the broader community, as they do so well here in Hong Kong.
And Alan, you raised such a range of issues, but I wonder whether I can pin you down and say that if you could change one big regulation, make one big change to the industry as it impacts on your industry, what would that be?
I think it's eventually the equalisation of the tax, the environments which the different operators operate in, and therefore allowing perhaps a more level contribution, more level and sustainable contribution to the industry going forward.
And given that TVN, Sky, does so much of the heavy lifting during the year, how frustrating is it when the Spring Carnival comes around and the big networks come in and they cherry pick the main races?
Oh, that's a specific industry decision to do so, because it's a balance between a segment that watches Sky, a segment that watches TVN, and a broader community interest in what are very big events, and I don't think you can deny that. And I mean, it causes debate and what have we, but I think each channel has its role.
And Michael, just finally on racing in Hong Kong and your experience here. I was out at Sha Tin on Sunday, and it's a sort of religious zeal that you see in terms of how the punters approach the races. It seems that their minds are totally focused the whole time, and I don't think you can say that about the crowd at the Melbourne Cup, but it certainly seems to be the case here. But the other thing that struck me was the mounting yard and the amount of attention that goes on that. And when you've got such a facility with so many seats, a retractable roof, the concentration, have you been able to figure out what that's all about?
Well, I think alcohol is a good piece to take out of the equation. I think people are incredibly focused, but I also think that in a city where you are constrained for space and you're constrained for the outdoor experience, it does fulfil a lot of the things that in other places the performing arts or festivals might do. And so you do get this sense of intense focus over 5 hours, and that people really want to be absolutely aware of every activity, in the same way that if you go and see Wagner, they'll travel the world to see it. I've never seen a crowd that is more fundamentally focused on as much information, as much observation, as they can do. But at the same time, I think people have a lot of fun. It doesn't stop, the highs, lows, pain, suffering, that if you win or you lose. I'd have to say, I suppose the only other place that I was quite surprised by was Mexico City in the 70s. I went there racing for the first time, and I happened to be there with Peter O'Toole, the actor, and 6 gorgeous women that were travelling with him. And the crowd, it was the only, when he walked, Lawrence of Arabia walked into the stand, it created the hugest commotion. And I did feel, that Mexico City experience is like every week at both Happy Valley or Sha Tin.